Prince Harry's brain scans were never supposed to be seen until now. A top surgeon has just come forward with explosive claims about Prince Harry's hidden medical condition, alleging that Meghan Markle blocked the release of a critical diagnosis that could change everything. According to leaked medical files and first-hand testimony, Harry was quietly diagnosed with early-onset neurological decline, something that could affect memory, mood, and even long-term decision-making. But why was this kept secret? Why did Meghan allegedly threaten legal action to keep doctors silent? And what does this reveal about the real state of Harry's mental health and his marriage? What you're about to hear may be the most shocking royal health revelation yet. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The rain fell softly over Balmoral Castle that morning. Quiet, steady, as if mimicking the wait in the heart of a monarch who had run out of places to hide. Inside the gray stone fortress, silence loomed like fog. No aides moved hurriedly through the corridors. No announcements were made. And for once, no one dared ask the question that had paralyzed the entire estate. Where is Prince Harry? What began as a missed call, then an unanswered text, had within days grown into a full-blown crisis. Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, husband, father, soldier, son, was missing. No travel notices. No security pings. No confirmed sightings in Montecito. And then came the leak, a claim that he had vanished shortly after requesting something so private, so sensitive, that even now, the monarchy fears the fallout. A DNA test. Not for a child. Not for anyone else. But for himself. And it was no ordinary request. It wasn't made through legal channels or family attorneys. It was a personal conversation, a late-night visit to Clarence House, shrouded in secrecy and marked by words spoken too softly for anyone else to hear. Weeks later, he was gone. And now, for the first time, King Charles, visibly exhausted, grieving, and trembling with a kind of regret the public has never seen before, has broken his silence. He was broken, Charles whispered, not during a press conference, not on the palace steps, but during a leaked recording of an emergency private conversation between senior royal aides. He wanted to know the truth, even if it destroyed everything. This isn't just a story about a son in crisis. This is a story about the most private kind of doubt, an identity unraveling from within. It's about a royal family collapsing under the weight of secrets they spent decades burying. It's about a father and son trapped in the shadow of a long-dead woman whose ghost refuses to stay silent. And it's about the one question Prince Harry may never get the answer to. Who is he, really? To understand the magnitude of the moment King Charles broke, we have to return to the cracks that had been showing for years, cracks not just in Harry's relationship with the monarchy, but in his relationship with himself. What began as whispered tabloid gossip in the 1990s that Harry bore an uncanny resemblance to one man outside the royal family has returned with more force and more consequence than ever before. James Hewitt, the name that has haunted Harry since adolescence. The cavalry officer whose affair with Princess Diana was no longer rumor, but public fact. For years, Harry dismissed the rumors as tabloid filth. He even joked about it. But what if he stopped laughing? What if he started wondering? Sources close to Harry now say the Duke had been asking questions for months before he vanished. That he had begun looking into records. That he had spoken to a private geneticist in Los Angeles. That he began confiding in people who, until recently, he'd considered off-limits. And yet, the royal family never suspected he would go this far. The request came one Sunday evening in early May. Harry flew into London unannounced, under the guise of visiting a children's charity. Instead, he went straight to Clarence House. He asked to see his father in private. According to a former palace aide, what began as a 20-minute conversation stretched over 2 hours. No one else was allowed in the room. There were no notes taken. No staff present. When Harry emerged, he looked shaken, pale, distracted. He left the same night and returned to California. Charles, according to insiders, didn't speak to anyone for 3 days. The tension was palpable. Palace staff noticed the king's unusual behavior, canceled meetings, early morning walks alone, refusing food. One senior royal insider would later confide that the king was completely rattled. Something was said in that room that rewired his emotional state. It wasn't just sadness. It was fear. What could have been said to King Charles that brought him to his knees? What could Harry have learned or demanded that sent shockwaves into the heart of the monarchy? The answer lies in a question the palace hoped would never resurface. It's not simply whether Charles is Harry's father. It's whether the royal bloodline has been compromised, and whether a monarch has spent the better part of 4 decades raising a son he may not be biologically connected to. For Charles, this isn't just a paternal issue. It's a constitutional crisis. It's a moral reckoning. And it's a spiritual collapse. Because if Harry isn't truly a Windsor by blood, then everything from his military titles to his place in the line of succession rests on a lie. And more personally, for a man who once confessed to being jealous of Diana's love for her boys, it would mean that the only real connection he ever had to her youngest son, may have been built on falsehood. This is what makes the king's breakdown so understandable and so terrifying. A source from the king's inner circle has revealed that Charles cried openly in front of his staff the day the news leaked about Harry's disappearance. "I failed him," Charles reportedly said. "I failed as a father." The question that now hangs in the air like smoke: did the DNA test happen? And if it did, what did it reveal? A retired royal physician, speaking on condition of anonymity, confirmed that DNA samples had been sent to an undisclosed private lab in Switzerland. No official report has been released. The palace denies any knowledge. But that hasn't stopped speculation from boiling over. And then came the letter. Just 1 week before he disappeared, Harry reportedly left a handwritten note addressed to Charles, William, and Meghan. Only Charles has read it in full. But a leak from a source close to William claims one line read, "I don't know who I am anymore, and I can't pretend to be someone I'm not." These are not the words of a man preparing for a vacation. These are the words of someone preparing to vanish. What followed was silence. No trace. No sign. Not even a breadcrumb for investigators to follow. The security team in Montecito found Harry's phone on the kitchen counter, turned off. His car remained in the garage. There were no withdrawal attempts from any account, no travel data, no traceable signal. Meghan refused to speak to press. She was seen leaving the mansion once with a hood over her head, escorted by lawyers. Paparazzi captured no emotion, only avoidance. She has made no official statement since the disappearance. The public is left to speculate. Was Harry suffering a breakdown? Was this a strategic vanishing act to reclaim his identity? Was there pressure from someone, inside or outside the family, to disappear before the truth became public? And perhaps the darkest question of all, was Harry running from something or running towards something? The British public, once fatigued by royal drama, has now become obsessed. Online forums are flooded with theories. Some claim he's in Iceland under an alias. Others believe he's checked into a remote wellness clinic in Africa. Still others are convinced he's been silenced by the palace to prevent constitutional crisis. But among all the noise, one truth rings clear. This time, the royal family is not in control of the narrative. And the king, once guarded and stoic, has now exposed something more vulnerable than anyone expected. Not powerlessness, but guilt. Not confusion, but fear. Not grief, but confession. This is the first time King Charles has shown the world that he may not know the truth about his own son. That he may have been lied to just as much as the public. That a monarch whose life was built around image and protocol now stands, in his final years, stripped to nothing but a father who's lost his child. As the rain continues to fall across Britain, and the tabloids fight over scraps of leaked information, one thing is certain. This story has only just begun. And the truth, if it ever fully emerges, may be more devastating than the royal family, or the British public, is prepared to hear. It was a Wednesday morning when the first real alarm bell rang. At exactly 8:43 a.m. Pacific Time, a private security officer assigned to the Sussex residence in Montecito, California, attempted to deliver a routine update to Prince Harry. It was standard protocol. Harry liked to be briefed on media coverage, charity inquiries, and pending appointments over breakfast. But on this particular day, there was no answer at his study door. No sound of typing. No scent of coffee. Just silence. That silence, initially mistaken for meditation or sleep, would escalate by nightfall into a full-scale crisis. According to leaked security logs reviewed by an insider, Prince Harry was last seen on internal CCTV footage at 10:37 p.m. the previous night. He had walked alone into the garden area, wearing a hoodie, headphones around his neck, and clutching a leather notebook. The footage showed him sitting for just under 2 hours on a bench beneath an old California oak tree. No visitors. No phone calls. He was deep in thought, according to staff who monitored him from a discreet distance. And then, at 12:16 a.m., he walked back inside. That was the last verified sighting of Prince Harry. The next morning, his phone was found placed neatly beside his bed, screen wiped, powered off. His wallet was in the drawer. His favorite aviator sunglasses, the same pair he'd worn on countless trips, were left behind on the windowsill. But the strangest thing wasn't what he left behind. It was what was missing: a small blue leather-bound notebook. The same notebook he had been seen writing in by the oak tree. That notebook, according to Meghan's staff, was always with him, filled with reflections, letters he never sent, and even unsent speeches. And now it was gone. What happened between midnight and dawn is still unknown. But by 9 a.m. that day, a message was quietly sent to Buckingham Palace. The Duke has not reported in for 12 hours. No sign of him. Recommend soft escalation. Soft escalation is a palace term for early-stage emergency activation, a subtle search involving inner circle aids, digital tracing, and discreet international alerts to embassies. They had used it once before, when Prince Harry temporarily vanished in 2009 after a mission with the British Army in Afghanistan went off radar. But this time, there was no military excuse. No Taliban outpost. Just a $14 million Montecito mansion, a mother of two in the kitchen, and a prince gone without a trace. What happened next would redefine how the royal family viewed internal crises. By 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, Montecito local police were unofficially informed. Not through 911, but through a royal liaison who requested discretion. No sirens. No press. Just background surveillance of highway cameras and surrounding estates. Drones were launched quietly to scan the coastlines. Security footage from local gas stations, rest stops, and private roads was requested under diplomatic pressure. No leads emerged. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, King Charles was pulled from a meeting with his private secretary at Sandringham. The moment he was told, he reportedly muttered a single word, "No," then stood, visibly trembling, and walked into the chapel without another word. The rest of the royal household was informed within the hour. Prince William was briefed at Kensington Palace and immediately requested a private meeting with MI5. By 3 p.m. British time, it was clear Prince Harry had disappeared. But to understand the gravity of that moment, to truly comprehend why it triggered emotional chaos in the royal family, you need to look back just 7 days before. It was then, according to palace insiders, that Prince Harry handed over the most destabilizing request of his life to King Charles. A request for a paternity confirmation. No legal threats. No press. Just a simple, gut-wrenching ask from son to father: "Please let me know the truth." It wasn't accompanied by anger. It wasn't shouted. In fact, Charles reportedly told a staffer that it was one of the calmest moments he had ever shared with Harry: quiet, direct, and loaded with unspoken pain. They talked about the years of rumors. About James Hewitt. About the emotional toll of being branded a royal imposter by the tabloids. Harry confessed that while he had never believed them as a child, something inside him had shifted as he aged. The doubt had never gone away. Charles was stunned. And yet, he didn't deny the possibility outright. He didn't lash out. According to one royal aide, he wept. Then he said, "If it will give you peace, I'll do it." And so, the process began. Harry, upon returning to the U.S., reached out to a confidential lab through a contact Meghan had previously used during her second pregnancy. DNA swabs were exchanged through an intermediary. Discretion was maintained at all costs. The results were scheduled to arrive via encrypted file on a Monday. That Monday came, and Prince Harry vanished less than 36 hours later. We now know, through leaks from Montecito security staff, that Harry spent much of that Sunday alone in his study. He asked not to be disturbed. He played music, James Blunt and Elton John, both longtime friends. He burned incense, as he often did when overwhelmed. And late that night, he walked into the garden with that notebook. When Meghan awoke the next morning, she thought Harry had gone for a run. It was common. But after 2 hours passed with no text, she checked his location. The GPS was off. She called the household staff. They hadn't seen him. That's when panic set in. The first call she made wasn't to the police. It was to Doria Ragland, her mother. What was said on that call remains undisclosed, but sources say Meghan was crying and repeated the words, "I don't know where he's gone. He just left." He didn't even say goodbye. By that evening, the palace had mobilized MI6 for assistance, though they denied this publicly. Intelligence agencies began combing international transit records. Facial recognition software was deployed across several airports. Meghan's legal team requested a gag order from Santa Barbara Superior Court to restrict press speculation. Nothing was working. Prince Harry had disappeared more completely than any royal in modern history. And what makes it more eerie is the fact that no ransom note, no threat, no adversary stepped forward. This wasn't a kidnapping. It was something else entirely. At this stage in the investigation, it was Prince William who reportedly broke rank with the traditional palace protocol. In a private meeting with top British cyber intelligence officers, he ordered a full data poll on Harry's online activity. Emails, searches, voicemail. They found fragments of draft messages, one addressed to Charles, another to an unknown address marked only JPH. JPH, many now believe, stands for James Paul Hewitt. If true, it would suggest that Harry had reached out to the man the tabloids long claimed was his biological father. And if he had made contact, what did they talk about? Was there a meeting planned? Could Harry have traveled to a location arranged by Hewitt? And more disturbingly, was that meeting the reason for his disappearance? James Hewitt has remained silent. Since the leak, he has not spoken to any press and has refused interviews. His representatives have only said, Mr. Hewitt has no comment on matters of the Duke of Sussex. But insiders claim that a silver Jaguar matching Hewitt's car model was seen on private security footage near the Sussex estate 2 days before Harry vanished. This revelation, though never confirmed by law enforcement, has triggered speculation that perhaps Harry did leave willingly to confront the man whose shadow followed him his entire life. As the hours turned into days, the absence of Prince Harry became more than a domestic concern. It became a full-scale international mystery. The media, sensing blood in the water, moved from cautious reporting to speculative frenzy. The phrase "Prince Harry missing" began trending globally within 36 hours of the first anonymous tip-off. News anchors from London to Los Angeles interrupted broadcasts. Social media was flooded with theories, many wild, some disturbingly plausible. But behind the walls of Buckingham Palace and the panic halls of Montecito, the atmosphere was not chaotic, it was silent, controlled, cold. Meghan Markle, ever image-conscious, refused to address the public directly. Her attorneys issued a statement through Archwell Foundation insisting the family needed privacy and space. But sources inside the Montecito home painted a very different picture. According to a staffer who requested anonymity, Meghan was frantic but strangely disconnected. She kept asking for updates, but she didn't want to see anyone. She didn't want the kids to hear. She didn't even cry in front of staff. It was like she was already preparing for the worst, but didn't want to admit it. The same source said Meghan remained isolated in the couple's master suite for nearly 3 days, emerging only to take a single walk along the garden trail where Harry had last been seen. Meanwhile, King Charles was unraveling. Unlike Meghan, Charles did not hide his emotional collapse. Within the palace, senior staff described him as utterly unmoored. His daily agenda was cancelled. Briefings went ignored. He reportedly refused to speak during a scheduled phone call with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Instead, he spent most of the time in the Queen Mother's private chapel at Windsor, lighting candles, praying, and staring at old family photographs. The most telling sign of Charles's breakdown came during a private meeting with Lord Chamberlain Andrew Parker. Sources confirmed the king sobbed openly and said, "I have lost him. I've lost my boy. I don't know how to fix what's broken." But it wasn't just grief. It was guilt. In a rare unfiltered moment, Charles allegedly admitted he had failed to prepare Harry for the consequences of truth. "He asked me for the test, and I gave him permission. I never thought he'd go through with it. But he did. And now he's vanished into nothing." Simultaneously, Prince William was taking a more proactive approach. Unlike his father, he refused to be paralyzed by sorrow. He began orchestrating a personal intelligence operation. William contacted a network of private investigators, digital analysts, and former Special Forces operatives with one goal: find Harry before the press found the full story. It was William who noticed something chilling in the GPS logs from Harry's household devices. At 2:32 a.m. the morning of his disappearance, Harry's smartwatch, typically used only for fitness tracking, sent out a single location ping to a server in northern Arizona. The ping was encrypted, but it gave just enough information to suggest the watch had connected to a Wi-Fi node near Sedona, a desert region known for its remote retreats and off-grid hideaways. That location baffled everyone. Harry had no known friends there, no past travel records, no property, and yet, the signal was unmistakable. By the time investigators reached the site, however, it was deserted. A small, secluded eco-lodge with no registered guests under Harry's name. The security cameras had been wiped. Staff claimed they saw no one matching his description. But a single housekeeper allegedly recalled a British man in a baseball cap, checking in briefly under the alias Jackson D. Carter. No ID was verified. Cash was used, and then nothing. This lead raised more questions than answers. Did Harry choose this location to disappear on purpose? Was it planned in advance? Or was someone luring him there? To try and reach him, William did something no one expected. He published a cryptic personal ad in the Times of London, disguised as a tribute piece to a fallen soldier. But embedded in the tribute were words only Harry would recognize, lines from a poem Diana used to recite to both boys. If you ever lose your way, walk towards the morning light. I'll be there. We all will. The ad went viral among royal watchers within hours. Theories exploded online. Analysts speculated it was a code, a desperate attempt by William to reach Harry through indirect channels without alerting the press or public that they were lost in the dark. But the response was silence. No text, no calls, no sightings. The disappearance was now entering its 10th day. At this point, public pressure forced the palace to issue a statement. In a carefully worded release, Buckingham Palace said they were aware of the Duke of Sussex's prolonged absence and are in communication with relevant authorities to ensure his well-being. It was the most neutral, distant, and carefully sanitized version of what was clearly a crisis of monumental proportions. The backlash was immediate. British citizens began demanding more. Where was Harry? Why was no Amber Alert equivalent being issued? Why had no family member spoken directly to the press? The hashtag Where is Harry topped UK trends for a week straight. Protesters stood outside the gates of Windsor with signs demanding transparency. And then came a viral video. An anonymous TikTok user posted what appeared to be shaky, late-night footage of a man resembling Prince Harry boarding a private boat at a remote dock near Vancouver Island. The man wore a heavy coat and kept his head down. 2 other unidentified individuals were with him. The clip was grainy. The location was confirmed. The boat's registration was faked. Authorities could not identify the men. But body movement experts brought in by tabloids noted that the gait, build, and ear structure of the man in question were highly consistent with Harry. Still, nothing could be verified. The boat disappeared into the fog. As this footage began to circle the internet, another curious detail emerged. A former friend of Meghan's, who spoke on the condition of anonymity, said that Meghan had once joked during a party in Los Angeles that, if Harry ever wanted to disappear, he could. Completely. He has enough wilderness in his soul to vanish into the Pacific and never come back. That quote, initially dismissed as idle party talk, has since taken on haunting weight. Especially when paired with another detail, Meghan had quietly hired a crisis PR team 4 days before Harry's disappearance became public. Why? What did she know? Internally, the palace's trust in Meghan began to fracture. While Charles had been publicly supportive of the Sussex marriage, sources now say that in private, the king has asked whether Meghan had known more about the DNA request and the fallout than she admitted. She controlled the calendar, one insider noted. She knew when the results were due. She managed the inbox. It's hard to believe she didn't know what was coming. By day 14, MI6 had expanded their net. Surveillance was ramped up across all possible exit routes Harry could have taken: private airstrips, land borders, foreign consulates. None had recorded a traveler matching Harry's biometrics or facial scan. But then, another ping. At 4:41 a.m., nearly 15 days after he vanished, a short burst message was logged on the British Embassy servers in Geneva. The message was encrypted and signed and erased itself within 60 seconds. But metadata confirmed it came from a device previously registered under Prince Harry's digital footprint. The message read, "I'm safe. I need space. Please tell him I'm still his son." That was it. No location. No explanation. Only that. For King Charles, this message was both relief and devastation. He knew Harry was alive, but he also knew Harry was hiding from him, and from the world, and most painfully, hiding from himself. When aides informed Charles of the Geneva ping, he reportedly went pale, then asked to be alone. He canceled his next 4 meetings. He took one long walk around the palace garden before returning to his private quarters and locking the doors. No one saw him for 12 hours. When he finally emerged, Charles looked older, grayer. His eyes, swollen and hollow, betrayed a man who understood that some losses cannot be resolved with a crown or a speech. Later that evening, in a private dinner with confidants, he reportedly uttered words that shocked even his most loyal advisors. I spent my life fighting for tradition, but I may have lost my son to truth. And so the timeline closes, for now, not with closure, but with a question that has haunted the monarchy since the first whisper of scandal reached the tabloids decades ago. If Harry does not return, what happens next? In the rigid, silent halls of British monarchy, where appearances are meticulously curated and family secrets are buried beneath generations of royal etiquette, there exists one topic so volatile, so deeply guarded, that even whispering about it can summon consequences. For decades, the rumor persisted. Prince Harry, the beloved second son of Princess Diana and then Prince Charles, did not share the same bloodline as his older brother William. The narrative, dismissed publicly as tabloid nonsense, lingered like fog on the Thames, refusing to lift, no matter how much time passed. And then, in a private moment that would forever divide the monarchy from within, Prince Harry broke the code of silence. He asked for a DNA test. It wasn't just a legal inquiry, nor was it wrapped in threats or litigation. It wasn't broadcast or even hinted at in public. It was personal, emotional, almost whispered. The scene was Clarence House, spring, unusually warm for London. The visit had been planned under the guise of charity coordination and brief royal meetings. Harry arrived without fanfare, dressed modestly in dark jeans and a light jacket. But he came with purpose. He came not as a prince, not as a member of the firm, but as a son seeking truth. When he asked King Charles for a private moment, no aides, no recordings, no security, few suspected anything unusual. Father and son had shared strained, yet civil conversations in the past. What occurred in the next hour, however, would be the most unsettling and emotional exchange either of them had ever experienced. Inside a quiet library, with the heavy drapes drawn and only the faint ticking of an antique clock to interrupt the silence, Harry laid it bare. He started not with accusation, but confession. He told Charles that the rumors had followed him since his school days. That whispers of James Hewitt, the cavalry officer who famously had an affair with Diana, never left the locker rooms or newspaper columns. That the public's perception of him as the spare, the outsider, the rebel, it all felt rooted in something deeper than just personality or press manipulation. He admitted he had spent the past 6 months quietly researching paternity testing, not because he hated his father, not because he wanted to embarrass the monarchy, but because he felt like he was losing grip on who he was. He said, "I just want to know if I've been living someone else's life." Charles, according to those later briefed, did not interrupt. He didn't lash out or storm off. He reportedly looked down at his hands, then into his son's eyes, and nodded. "If it will give you peace," he said, "we'll do it." That moment, 2 generations of royalty facing an invisible truth, was not documented. There were no photos, no transcripts, but its echo would ricochet through royal corridors for months to come. Charles's agreement was conditional. He wanted the testing done discreetly, through a third-party medical source outside of government or royal facilities. He feared leaks, naturally. But more than that, he feared the answer. For a man whose reign had barely begun, whose legitimacy as a father, a king, and a Windsor was now being quietly placed under question by his own son, this was the ultimate nightmare. Arrangements were made. Harry returned to California. His lawyers contacted a private medical institution in Switzerland known for discretion in royal and political matters. Samples were taken through a mediator. The process was clinical, untraceable, clean. Charles submitted his sample through a retired royal physician who had once served Queen Elizabeth. The physician, according to leaked emails, confirmed that everything was handled properly and without digital fingerprints. No royal ID numbers. No names. Just numbers. Just DNA. The results, sources say, were expected to take 10 days. 10 days. That period was described by insiders as emotionally unbearable for both men. Harry, while physically in Montecito, was said to be emotionally absent. Staff described him as withdrawn, pacing the house late at night, avoiding calls. He turned down multiple speaking events and canceled 2 meetings with veteran organizations. He stopped riding his bike, which had been a daily routine. He stopped reading bedtime stories to Archie. Something had changed. Meghan, trying to keep things normal, tiptoed around him. She instructed the nannies to keep the children away unless summoned. She brought Harry tea, but received no thanks. One insider claimed she told a friend, "He's in a place I can't reach. He's preparing for a truth I don't want to speak." But if Harry was spiraling into emotional limbo, King Charles was not faring much better. Inside Buckingham Palace, Charles became erratic. He snapped at aides. He reportedly tore up briefing notes in frustration. He requested to see old letters written by Diana, the ones stored in a red box under lock and key. When told they were sealed, he ordered they be delivered to him anyway. He began revisiting photographs from Harry's childhood, comparing facial expressions, eye color, hairlines. It was as though he was retroactively trying to see what he had missed, or perhaps what he never dared to confront. One day, during a tea service with Queen Camilla, Charles reportedly blurted out, "What if I'm not his father? What if I've been mourning a lie?" Camilla, stunned, is said to have responded, "Don't say that again. You'll break yourself." But the seed had already been planted. And with each day that passed, the anxiety grew. As the expected date of the test results approached, both father and son fell into radio silence. They didn't call. They didn't write. They didn't even coordinate through aides. The invisible thread between them, already frayed, was on the verge of snapping entirely. Then the day came. The file arrived, encrypted and password protected. The report, according to sources with indirect access, confirmed what neither man wanted to see in print. The DNA profiles did not match conclusively. While not ruling out Charles as the biological father, the test showed insufficient direct paternal markers to confirm paternity without broader family sampling. In simpler terms, Charles's DNA alone was not enough to confirm a biological link to Harry with certainty. The file recommended testing additional relatives, including a known confirmed descendant of Prince Philip, for triangulation. The ambiguity shattered them both. For Harry, it was the final straw. To be told he might not be Charles's son was one thing. To receive a medical document that didn't give a definitive answer, only more doubt, was worse than confirmation. It was torment without clarity. Harry disappeared less than 2 days later. For Charles, the report didn't just open a door to doubt, it opened a gate to decades of pain. It meant revisiting every moment with Diana, every assumption, every insecurity. He questioned whether Diana had lied, whether she had tried to protect Harry from the truth, whether he had raised a boy who never belonged to him, and worse, whether Harry knew it all along. Palace aides later revealed that Charles did something he had not done in years. He wrote a letter. It was addressed to Harry. Long, handwritten. It said, according to a source, whatever blood may say, I am your father. I raised you. I love you. I always will. No test can undo that. The letter was never delivered. Harry was gone. It is difficult to imagine a monarch brought to his knees by something as intimate as paternity. Yet, inside the walls of Buckingham Palace, far from the flashing cameras and iron gates, that is exactly what happened. For King Charles III, the revelation about Prince Harry's DNA was not just an unraveling of scientific truth. It was an emotional collapse, decades in the making. And when the ambiguity of the test arrived, it didn't merely confirm or deny. It destroyed the illusion of certainty he had been clinging to since the first time he held Harry in his arms. The test did not conclusively prove Charles was not Harry's biological father, but neither did it give him the clarity he so desperately needed. It left a gap, a chasm of doubt that no crown, no title, no photograph could fill. The very nature of the language used in the report, inconclusive, insufficient genetic overlap, triangulation recommended, did not feel like science. It felt like abandonment. When the envelope containing the printed results was handed to King Charles by his most trusted aide, Sir Clive Alderton, the king reportedly asked to be left alone. He sat in the Crimson Drawing Room, one of the most private and historic parts of the palace, beneath a portrait of Queen Victoria and beside a fireplace that had once warmed Winston Churchill's wartime consultations. There, with trembling hands, he slit the envelope open and began to read. Within minutes, staff heard the sound of a teacup shattering on the marble floor. He had dropped it. What followed was not a royal outburst or a tantrum. There was no slamming of doors or bellowing commands. Instead, there was silence. A chilling kind of silence that alarmed even the most seasoned palace servants. He sat still, the report on his lap, his hands resting on the arms of his chair. A single tear, according to a guard posted nearby, rolled down his cheek. Then he whispered something no one had heard him say since Diana's funeral. I don't know who I am anymore. To the outside world, King Charles was still king. His face appeared on stamps. His speeches were delivered with practiced calm. His public appearances continued, albeit with shorter durations and more frequent last-minute cancellations. But behind closed doors, the man unraveling was not the ruler of the British Empire. He was a father caught in a vortex of doubt. The first person he reached out to after receiving the results was not Prince William. It was, surprisingly, Queen Camilla. Despite a marriage formed under fire and forged through decades of scandal, Charles trusted Camilla above all others. Yet when he attempted to explain the DNA results to her, something fractured between them. Camilla reportedly responded not with sympathy, but with strategic concern. "You must not say a word," she said. "Not to the press. Not to William. Not even to your advisors. This must be managed, not mourned." That word, managed, deeply offended Charles. In that moment, he realized they were speaking two different languages. He was grieving the possible loss of a son. She was thinking of succession, headlines, and constitutional stability. Charles allegedly snapped. "This is not a bloody brand. It's my family." Camilla left the room without replying. Over the following days, Charles descended into an emotional state that stunned those closest to him. He canceled 2 scheduled meetings with Archbishop Justin Welby. He refused to attend a scheduled visit to a children's cancer ward, a visit he had personally requested months earlier. He would walk the palace gardens at odd hours of the night, sometimes barefoot, sometimes in silence, sometimes repeating Diana's name under his breath. One longtime butler, who served both Elizabeth II and Charles, remarked, "I've seen monarchs grieve, but I've never seen one unravel like this. Not even after Diana died." Part of what tormented Charles was the fact that he hadn't fought the test. He had agreed to it, voluntarily. He had opened Pandora's box with his own hands. And now, with its contents spilled across his throne, he couldn't pretend it hadn't happened. But perhaps the most disturbing part was that, in the depths of his mind, he had always wondered. He remembered the cold years of his marriage to Diana, years filled with distance, bitterness, and brief moments of warmth that never lasted long enough. He remembered the rumors, the long stretches where they lived in separate quarters, the military men Diana admired. And he remembered the way Harry had always been so different, not just in temperament, but in demeanor, in emotional wiring. He tried to dismiss these thoughts. He told himself it was cruel to think this way, that love was not made of DNA, but of years, memories, and sacrifice. But when the report offered no closure, only confusion, the doubts returned in full force. He summoned his private secretary to retrieve every letter Diana had written to him during their marriage. Every card, every birthday note. He read them in a single night. Some were cold, others were oddly warm. But one, dated shortly after Harry's birth, stood out. It read, "Despite everything, I hope you'll see that Harry needs your strength. He'll never know how fragile he really is, not unless you make him feel anchored." Charles read that line over and over again. Was she warning him? Was that a hint? Or was it just the reflection of a young mother trying to reconcile her life with a man she no longer loved? The king didn't sleep that night. In the following days, Charles attempted to reach out to Harry. He texted. He emailed. He even tried calling via a direct, secured line, one used only for family emergencies. There was no response. The realization that Harry might have vanished not just physically but spiritually, intentionally removing himself from the family and from Charles, cut deeper than any scandal or rebellion ever had. For decades, Charles had struggled to be seen as a warm father. He was called cold, distant, more concerned with orchids than children. But those who truly knew him behind closed doors always described something different. A man who had struggled to express love in the way Diana had, but who nonetheless loved with a quiet, desperate ferocity. That desperation had to end. Charles stopped eating properly. His doctor, concerned about weight loss and stress-induced hypertension, recommended a short sabbatical in Scotland. But Charles refused to leave London. "If my son returns," he said, "he needs to find me where I was when he left." Eventually, Prince William confronted him. In a private meeting inside Windsor Castle, William asked the question that everyone had been avoiding. "Is he really my brother?" Charles couldn't answer. He said only, "He's my son. That's all I know." That non-answer left William shaken. He had never doubted Harry's identity. Not once. But now, for the first time, his mind opened a door to doubt he couldn't easily close. The monarchy had faced scandals before, infidelity, abdications, affairs, political tension. But never this. Never an internal identity crisis with the potential to dislodge the very structure of fatherhood, bloodline, and inheritance. Behind every military title, behind every crown jewel and ancestral oath, was a family. And now that family was bleeding in silence. The public knew none of this. They saw a king attending events with a smile, shaking hands, waving. But palace insiders knew the truth. The king was breaking. The man who had waited 70 years for his moment on the throne now found himself asking whether the most important role of his life, fatherhood, had been an illusion. And for a man who had spent his entire adulthood craving love, affirmation, and connection, first from Diana, then from Camilla, then from the public, this doubt struck at his very core. Love without blood was one thing, but the loss of both was something else entirely. He was a name that once drifted across the pages of British tabloids like smoke, visible, provocative, and always controversial. James Hewitt. A former British Army officer turned equestrian, with a romantic past that became entangled with the most watched woman in the world, Princess Diana. His presence in the royal narrative began as gossip, metastasized into scandal, and ultimately settled into a sort of uneasy historical footnote. Until now. With Prince Harry's DNA uncertainty rising to the surface, Hewitt's name has returned with brutal force, resurrecting a wave of questions that had long simmered beneath the public's collective memory. And for the monarchy, his reappearance isn't just inconvenient. It is existential. To understand why James Hewitt remains the nucleus of the royal paternity debate, one must return to the late 1980s, a period defined by intense emotional distance between Prince Charles and Princess Diana, whose marriage, once heralded as fairy-tale perfection, had by then begun to disintegrate into polite despair. During this time, Diana met Hewitt through mutual connections within the royal military circle. He was a cavalry officer with charm, a dashing jawline, and, crucially, a sensitivity that Diana reportedly found absent in her husband. He listened. He smiled. He offered words of comfort and rode horses with her. Over time, the connection turned intimate. Diana, in her own words, confirmed the relationship. During her now infamous BBC Panorama interview in 1995 with Martin Bashir, she admitted, "Yes, I adored him. Yes, I was in love with him. But I was very let down." That single confession added permanent fuel to the rumors that had already begun to swirl regarding Prince Harry's paternity. Because when the public compared photographs, Hewitt's auburn hair, his facial structure, the spacing of his eyes, they could not help but see similarities. To them, it was more than coincidence. It felt like evidence. There was only one problem. James Hewitt didn't meet Diana until 1986. Prince Harry was born in September 1984. The timeline, officially, ruled him out. And yet, rumors persisted, largely because of visual similarity and the monarchy's refusal to address the issue with clarity. The firm's decision to remain silent created an information vacuum, and in that vacuum, suspicion grew. Why didn't Charles ever address it publicly? Why didn't Hewitt outright dismiss the claim with more force? The answer may lie in something even more unsettling than proof: the emotional fog of royal life. There was always an ambiguity to the timeline, at least in public perception. Some suggested Diana and Hewitt had known each other longer than disclosed. Others pointed to conflicting accounts of their early meetings. And in the chaos of tabloid sensationalism, perception often mutated into assumed truth. But perhaps the most important factor wasn't the affair itself, it was the way the palace handled it. Or, more accurately, didn't. The royal family's code of silence became a double-edged sword. By refusing to engage, they seemed both dignified and evasive. As a result, the public, and later even Harry himself, were left with a question the monarchy refused to put to rest. Inside royal circles, James Hewitt's name was treated like a curse. To mention it was to provoke tension. Diana's former staff reported that the topic was forbidden. One ex-aide claimed that when the subject was raised during a strategy meeting in the early 2000s about media perception, Charles allegedly said, "Don't speak that name in my presence again." Yet privately, it loomed. There is reason to believe that even Charles himself, in his most doubtful moments, feared the rumors might hold truth. And Harry, growing up in a household where he was often painted as the emotional one, began to internalize that there was something different about him. The media noticed. Royal commentators dissected everything. From his hair color to his rebellious streak, his discomfort with protocol, his mother's affection, and his father's coolness. They spun it all into a narrative that said, he doesn't quite fit. And as Harry matured, that narrative followed him like a shadow. Years later, James Hewitt himself tried to quell the firestorm. In an interview with Sunday Mirror, he insisted he could not be Harry's father, stating, "There really is no possibility whatsoever that I am Harry's father. I can absolutely assure you that I am not. He added, it's worse for him, probably, poor chap. But the damage was already done. In the digital age, denials don't erase suspicions, they preserve them. And once the story entered pop culture, it became nearly impossible to kill. The television series The Crown touched on the affair obliquely, never naming Hewitt outright, but hinting at Diana's romantic life beyond Charles. Memes circulated. Late-night comedians made jokes. The public grew comfortable with the idea that Harry might be someone else's child, even if no one had the courage or evidence to confirm it. Still, Harry remained quiet. For years, he dismissed the rumors, laughing them off or refusing to dignify them. But inside, the erosion had begun. Sources close to him have said that Harry's interest in the Hewitt theory began in earnest during the lead-up to his wedding to Meghan Markle. He reportedly expressed concern that bringing a biracial American woman into the royal family might reignite old scrutiny, not just of Meghan, but of himself. And indeed, it did. Tabloids, eager to stir controversy, revisited every old whisper. Online forums reignited debates about timelines and cheekbones. And once Harry became a father, a chilling new twist emerged. People began comparing his children's features to those of James Hewitt. According to one family friend, that was the turning point. It was never about proving Charles wasn't his father, the friend said. It was about ending the echo chamber of doubt, about not passing that same question on to his children. He needed to know for their sake as much as his own. And that brings the story full circle. Because when Harry requested the DNA test, he wasn't just asking his father for truth. He was confronting a rumor that had defined the backdrop of his entire life. And that rumor had a name. James Hewitt. What few people know is that, according to unconfirmed reports, Harry may have tried to contact Hewitt before the test was finalized. A private email address linked to Harry's digital footprint sent a message to a known Hewitt family server 3 days before the DNA results were scheduled to arrive. The contents of the message are unknown. Hewitt has denied receiving it. But the timing is suspect, and the emotional toll it may have taken on Harry cannot be overstated. To look into the eyes of a man your mother once loved and wonder whether part of you came from him, it's not just a scandal. It's an identity crisis of generational weight. In the weeks after Harry's disappearance, whispers began to circulate that a journalist had spotted a man strongly resembling Hewitt in Geneva, around the same time a signal from Harry's device had pinged embassy servers. The sighting has never been confirmed, and Hewitt has made no public appearances since Harry vanished. His estate in Devon remains shuttered to outsiders. His lawyers refuse comment. But if even a sliver of that story is true, it suggests a possible meeting, a confrontation, or perhaps a reconciliation that will never be documented. And maybe that's the most tragic part. For all the media spectacle, for all the headlines and debates and snide remarks, what remains at the core is a deeply human need to understand one's origins. The monarchy treats lineage as divine right. But for Harry, it was always a question with no sacred answer, only the echo of a name he could never escape. James Hewitt is not simply a man from Diana's past. He is a symbol of everything Harry was told to ignore, of everything Charles feared, of everything the monarchy tried to bury beneath protocol and pearls. And now, as the world searches for clues about Prince Harry's whereabouts, that symbol has returned, more potent, more threatening, and more unresolved than ever. In every major royal scandal, there comes a defining moment, a sentence, a confession, a document that eclipses speculation and delivers the story in its most raw and unfiltered form. For Prince Harry's disappearance, that moment arrived in the form of a single sheet of cream-colored stationery. Folded, unsealed, and resting on the edge of his writing desk in Montecito, it contained not a manifesto, nor a blame-filled farewell, but something infinitely more disturbing, a cry from a man unraveling. The letter was discovered by one of the house staff in the late hours of the morning, roughly 10 hours after Harry had last been seen. By then, the household had already been turned upside down. Meghan was pacing, alternating between calls to her legal team and quiet sessions with her mother Doria, who had flown in overnight. The security team had begun reviewing camera footage and tracking device pings. No one had noticed the letter at first. It wasn't left in the open. It had been tucked beneath a copy of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, one of Harry's favorite books in recent years, perhaps a final nod to Stoicism before he chose to disappear. The letter was addressed simply, for them. Not for my family. Not for William or for Meghan. Just them. When Meghan opened it, she reportedly said nothing for several minutes. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply handed it to her mother and left the room. The contents of the letter have never been released in full. But according to multiple palace insiders and leaked excerpts confirmed by members of Harry's staff, the letter contained 3 distinct paragraphs, each more unsettling than the last. The first began with a disarmingly quiet tone. If you're reading this, it started, "I'm not in danger. I just needed to leave, to breathe, to feel something that wasn't manufactured for headlines or hidden behind titles. This is not goodbye. It's just pause." What followed was not an accusation, but an inventory of emotional dislocation. Harry listed the things that had been haunting him for months: waking up with panic attacks, recurring dreams of his mother walking away from him in a tunnel, the recurring sensation that his entire life had been built around roles he didn't choose. "I've worn the uniform, read the speeches, held the hands, smiled at the parades. But behind it all, I've always felt like I was playing someone else's son. Not because I didn't love you all, but because somewhere deep down, I started to believe I might not be who you say I am." That line reportedly shook King Charles when he heard it days later. Playing someone else's son. Not rejecting Charles. Not denouncing his upbringing, but articulating a lifelong sense of spiritual misplacement. In the second paragraph, Harry turned to his children. "To Archie and Lilibet, if you ever read this, I need you to know that I did this not to leave you, but to protect you from becoming me. A man chasing shadows. A boy obsessed with origins instead of presence. You deserve truth, even when it hurts." That line, insiders claim, is what left Meghan devastated. While she had always feared Harry might emotionally withdraw, she never believed he would use such finality in his words. And yet, even in that sentence, there was no condemnation. No anger. Just resignation. He was lost. But it was the third and final paragraph that delivered the heaviest blow. It was addressed neither to his wife nor his children, but to his brother and father. "William, I'm sorry for the years we lost. I didn't know how to be your brother without being compared to you. I didn't know how to be free without hurting you. But please don't look for me. Not yet. I'm not running from you. I'm running from the question that's been rotting inside my chest since I was old enough to hear my name attached to a man I never met." Then a single final line. "I don't know who I am anymore." That sentence, just 8 words, has come to define the entire crisis. Not a rebellion, not a betrayal, but a collapse. An emotional collapse from a man born into an institution that gave him everything but the certainty of his own identity. When the letter was shared with King Charles, he reportedly collapsed into a chair and wept. Not dramatically, not like a monarch in mourning, but like a father in disbelief. "I did this," he reportedly told Camilla later that night. "By staying silent for so long, I made him believe the silence was truth." Camilla didn't respond. There are rumors that Prince William read the letter while alone in his private study, that he didn't speak for 2 hours afterward, that he clutched the page so tightly his knuckles turned white. He later told a friend that it wasn't the letter itself that hurt, it was how familiar the tone felt. That letter, William reportedly said, sounded like Mom, when she was on the edge. Indeed, the parallels to Diana were difficult to ignore. A person pushed to the brink not by violence or betrayal, but by the slow erosion of identity. Trapped in a castle yet unable to find home. Publicly adored but privately adrift. The letter, despite its length, left more questions than answers. Where had Harry gone? What were his plans? Was this temporary or permanent? Was he safe? The security detail found no accompanying instructions. No coded messages. No map. Just that letter. And the missing notebook he was last seen writing in. In the days that followed, palace staff scrambled to reframe the narrative. Advisors suggested issuing a statement calling it a brief mental health sabbatical. Others warned against any mention of the DNA test, fearing constitutional fallout. Meghan, for her part, released nothing. But inside the firm, panic grew. Because a handwritten letter meant something no statement or press release could undo. It meant that Harry had been deliberate, that this was not a kidnapping, not an accident, but a decision. And that decision, rooted in emotional torment and generational silence, made it all the more terrifying. There's also the matter of the handwriting itself. Several analysts, brought in to authenticate and analyze emotional tone, noted the precise, steady formation of the letters. No tremors. No evidence of haste. This was a man who knew exactly what he wanted to say, who had been planning the words for days, if not weeks. The only emotional spike came in the ink itself. Midway through the final paragraph, The ink is reported to have darkened briefly, suggesting pressure. An emotional surge. Possibly tears on the page. Possibly the moment he wrote the line, "I don't know who I am anymore." What does a monarchy do when the son of the king walks away not from duty, but from self? How does a family recover from a message that is neither goodbye nor plea, but a quiet scream for freedom? In royal history, letters have often become tools of power. Declarations, abdications, secret confessions. But this letter was none of those. It was something more personal, more devastating. It was a moment in which one of the most visible men in the world admitted he had become invisible to himself. And in doing so, he didn't just expose his pain. He exposed the cost of silence. The royal family is often thought of as an institution of symbolism, bound by ceremonial grace and unyielding tradition. But beneath the grandeur, there are real relationships, complex, layered, fractured. In the days following Prince Harry's disappearance and the discovery of his haunting letter, the carefully guarded inner workings of that royal web began to show signs of rupture. Not publicly, of course. In the eyes of the world, the firm remained stoic. But behind palace doors, the emotional toll of Harry's vanishing act began to exact a devastating price, particularly on his brother, Prince William, and his wife, Meghan Markle. For Prince William, the news arrived not with shock, but with a strange, paralyzing silence. By the time he was shown Harry's letter, he had already known his brother was missing for over 30 hours. He had received calls from security personnel in California, been briefed by MI5, and consulted with senior aides at Clarence House. But no amount of data could prepare him for the human pain of reading those words. William took the letter to his private study at Kensington Palace. He asked not to be disturbed. His wife, Catherine, sat silently outside the door for almost 2 hours, refusing to take meetings or answer calls. Inside, the future king sat hunched over the pages, reading them again and again. According to a palace aide who later saw the letter's condition, it had been folded and unfolded so many times the creases had started to split. There was no scribbling, no notes. But the back of the envelope had been crushed into his palm so tightly, it bore a deep imprint of his thumbprint, like he had been clinging to it for life. When he finally emerged, William said only 5 words to his wife. "He doesn't hate us, Kate." It wasn't relief in his voice. It was despair. Because while Harry's letter did not condemn anyone, it laid bare a truth William had been fighting to deny for years. That he and his brother had never fully reconciled, not after the Oprah interview, not after the funeral of Prince Philip, not even after their supposed walk of unity following Queen Elizabeth's passing. What they had been presenting to the world was not a rebuilt bridge, but a painted-over chasm. And now Harry had disappeared into that chasm, leaving William suspended on one side, unable to follow. Behind closed doors, William struggled. The man often seen by the public as poised, reserved, even cool, began to exhibit signs of emotional exhaustion. He missed 2 high-level briefings on national education policy. He snapped at an aide during a family event planning meeting. His appetite disappeared. He reportedly told a staffer, "I feel like I failed Mom. I promised I'd always protect him. And now he's gone." But William's grief didn't manifest in drama. It came in quiet devastation. He became more withdrawn, more insular. He began taking late walks on the palace grounds, retracing the same path he and Harry once played along as children. One guard stationed on the perimeter of Kensington reported hearing William humming an old Beatles tune under his breath one evening, "Let It Be." When asked if he was all right, William replied, "He used to sing that when we were little." Badly. His sorrow was not only personal, it was generational. Because as the heir to the throne, William understood the optics. A prince had vanished, emotionally broken. The monarchy had failed to shield him. And now, a new kind of scandal was brewing, not political, not financial, but human. Privately, William called his father nearly every evening. The calls were short, tense. They usually ended with one of them hanging up first. Neither could agree on what to do next. Charles wanted to wait. William wanted to act. "Every hour he's missing, it becomes harder to say we're in control," William reportedly argued. "This isn't just about him. It's about the people watching us fall apart and saying nothing." At one point, William reportedly proposed a radical idea, releasing Harry's letter to the public. "He wrote it to us," he said, "but he left it for the world." The idea was shut down almost instantly by Charles and royal advisors. They argued it would be emotional manipulation. It would be read out of context. And worst of all, it would set a precedent that family breakdowns within the firm were now public domain. But William had already made up his mind. He authorized an anonymous source to leak a portion of the letter to a trusted journalist. Not the entire thing, just the final line, "I don't know who I am anymore." When the words appeared in a Sunday morning paper, the response was instant. The public's reaction shifted. Sympathy overtook skepticism. Commentators who had once accused Harry of attention-seeking now described his disappearance as a mental health crisis. Psychologists went on air to analyze his words. Former royal staffers gave emotional interviews. Even political figures commented, with one MP saying, "We may disagree with Harry's choices, but no man should have to vanish to be heard." And amid the emotional storm, all eyes turned to Meghan Markle. Where was she? Why hadn't she spoken? In truth, Meghan's world had been upended just as much as the monarchy's. But her response was starkly different. From the moment Harry went missing, Meghan had entered what one staffer called crisis lockdown. She shut down interviews, paused brand deals, delayed podcast appearances. All PR activity stopped. She refused to be photographed. The woman once known for dominating the headlines had vanished from public life. Inside the Montecito mansion, she reportedly wept for hours upon first reading the letter. She clutched it to her chest and said, "I didn't know he was this far gone." But after the initial breakdown, she shifted into control mode. Aides said she began assembling a legal war room, not to sue, but to prepare. She anticipated a wave of blame. She knew the press would try to tie Harry's disappearance to her. And she feared, perhaps rightly, that the palace would eventually attempt to distance themselves by suggesting she had failed to keep Harry stable. To protect herself and her children, Meghan contacted 3 separate crisis communication firms. She met with legal representatives from both California and the UK. She increased private security detail on Archie and Lilibet. And she made a difficult decision, one she'd privately wrestled with for months. She reached out to Doria Ragland and asked her to temporarily move in. "I can't do this alone," Meghan reportedly told her mother. "I need someone the kids can lean on if I fall apart." Meghan's silence, while strategic, was also deeply personal. She felt betrayed by Harry's decision to leave without telling her. According to a friend, Meghan had sensed something was building, but she never imagined he would disappear entirely. She read the letter a dozen times. The line that struck her the most wasn't the closing line, it was the sentence addressed to the children. "You deserve truth, even when it hurts." To Meghan, that line felt like a warning. That something bigger was coming. Something tied to the DNA question, perhaps. Or worse, to her. While she publicly remained mute, inside the Montecito home, Meghan was reportedly furious with the palace. She believed they had failed Harry, that the environment they kept defending, the one Harry fled, was not sustainable. And yet, she also blamed herself. "I encouraged him to seek answers," she said in a closed meeting with her team. "But I never told him to walk away." Meghan's internal team began quietly drafting a statement in case of prolonged disappearance or, worse, confirmation of death. It included carefully worded phrases like emotional trauma, struggle with identity, and deep reflection. But she never released it. She kept it in a folder marked, if needed. She was waiting, watching. Both William and Meghan, despite their differences, were now suspended in the same emotional purgatory, grieving a man who was technically still alive, yet unreachable. Both had once loved him. Both had fought with him. Both had failed to hold on to him. And the difference in how they processed that failure became glaring. William retreated into guilt. Meghan retreated into preparation. And the palace retreated into silence. Publicly, the family began presenting a united front. Appearances were made. Speeches delivered. Smiles forced. But the absence of Harry, the elephant in every room, hung heavy over them all. Even Prince George, reportedly, asked his father one evening, "When is Uncle Harry coming back?" William didn't know how to answer. Because the truth was, no one did.